Christian home and was raised by Christian parents. Both my parents have Christian backgrounds and for the most part have Christian families. I grew up following Christian rules, obeying my parents, following God, doing what I thought was the right thing. I grew up going to Matt Christian campground, and I accepted Christ as my Savior at the age of 7. I walked up to the altar during the night church service with my parents, and that's when they helped me accept Christ in my heart. To be honest, I was nervous, and I wasn't really sure if I knew what it meant to accept Christ as your personal Savior. So every time someone asked me if I wanted to accept Jesus in my heart, of course I always said the prayer just to make sure I really accepted Him. Growing up, I never hid my religion from others, and I not only taught myself new things about the Bible, but I also became a teacher for children at church. I felt like it was a calling for me. I love children. Then an incident happened with my family, and that's when I first started questioning my faith. After that incident happened, my life pretty much went back to normal. I still had my everyday struggles just like most people. Most of them seemed to be with my faith. I went to church every Sunday, but I never got anything out of it. Youth group was okay, but I mainly went to see my friends. I taught CLC because I volunteered and I loved the children, but did it have anything to do with my love for God? I mean, I loved God, but I guess I was in the stage where I thought church was boring. Then I went on to a youth group trip. Best thing that had ever happened to me. We learned about giving up our stools for God and that we needed to give up our whole stool to God. We can't just give Him partial and call it good. We learned that God had a plan for us and that we needed to be smack dab in the middle of that plan. That night, my uncle sat us outside and spoke to us about giving up our stools to God. And that night I decided I wanted to give my whole stool to God, all of it, and I was going to try and not take any of it back. I told my peers that I had a hard time letting go of my anger, and then I held on to a lot of my feelings, and I needed God's help with that. And many times my feelings would just explode out of me, and I wouldn't be able to help it. Am I able to say that I've let God hold on to that stool for me? Sadly, no. I have made mistakes in my life. I have been tempted with that lovely thing called peer pressure, and I have been named that perfect child. I have been pressured into always doing the right thing and never doing anything wrong. That was me, the princess who, to some people, didn't know how to have fun because it wasn't the right type of fun. But I got through the peer pressure of drinking and drugs and hanging around the wrong crowd of people. I knew who my real friends were, and they respected me for the decisions I made. I had to thank God for giving me the real friends who understood the lifestyle I had chosen and who didn't make fun of me for it. To this day, I've always found the right friends and never the wrong ones. I started giving my stool back to God. I was going to school, church was good, family life was good, and I loved God. I had asked God to forgive me of all my sins, and I had given my stool back to Him completely. Then on April 22nd, 2012, my brother Tyler was in an accident. I remember praying while I waited and hoped that everything was going to be okay. Everyone I knew was praying for him, and then I finally was able to go to the hospital when I first saw him. My whole world turned upside down. My mom came and hugged me, and I remember telling her it was going to be okay. I became numb inside, and I just couldn't believe it was actually happening to my family. My brother. And as the night went on, I began losing hope. I still prayed to God that things would be okay, but I began doubting Him again. And then I lost my best friend, and I had no clue how to express myself. I felt alone and scared, and I didn't express any feelings at all. I never cried once at the visitation, I blamed myself for telling my mom that everything was going to be okay, and I blamed myself for not going to see my brother when I saw him at work a couple nights before he died. After the week, I was so numb that I was feeling depressed, and most of all, I hated God for what He did. And I mean, I hated Him. I couldn't believe He would do something like this to a family that has praised Him. Like someone told me, why do bad things always happen to such good people? I was in complete denial, and I didn't want to do anything. I started getting stressed out, and it took a lot for me to even go to work and school. I didn't want to talk to anybody, go to church, and at one point I thought to myself, why did you take my brother? Why didn't you take me? I felt alone, confused, and scared, and I just held these emotions in. It wasn't until sometime after Christmas that I finally began to accept that Tyler was really gone and that he was never coming back. I blamed myself the guy who hit Tyler, his so-called girlfriend who should have picked him up that night, but most of all, I blamed God. I was angry with God for a long time. But then I realized that God took Tyler from us before the devil could. Tyler was heading down the wrong path, and God did us a favor. But I was being selfish because all I could think about was how I lost someone who wasn't even mine to begin with. My mom told me that it's okay to be angry with God as long as you still have faith and believe in Him. I still have my days where my emotions are all over the place, but I look to God for those answers now instead of being angry with Him. I know God does the things He does because He loves us. He wouldn't have died on the cross if He didn't love us. I want to live my life serving the awesome God we have instead of being angry with Him all the time. I'm thankful for Him and the wonderful family and friends that He has blessed me with, and I'm thankful every day for His never-ending love for me.
Accept Jesus as your Savior today?
Yes.
We baptize you in the name of the Father,